Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you're feeling comfortable, ready to let go of your day and slip into a world of calm. Take a deep breath, let the tension melt away, and prepare to journey through a story where magic, mystery, and wonder unfold. Let yourself be cradled by the words and the soft rhythm of the story, and let it guide you into a place of tranquility. Now, let's begin. The wind in Rivendell that evening was soft, like an old lullaby whispered across the stars. The trees, tall and silver-leaved, swayed with a grace that made no sound, their movement more like breathing than rustling. Above them, the sky stretched vast and still, a tapestry of stars sewn with ancient care. The last light of day had long vanished behind the distant misty mountains, and now the halls of Elrond glowed like lanterns in the dark, their warm golden light spilling out through carved windows and settling gently on the paths below. Gandalf the Grey stood alone on a balcony that overlooked the Silver Falls. He leaned slightly on his staff, though not from weariness. It was more out of habit than need. After so many years, the staff had become more than a tool. It was an extension of his presence, his thoughts, his power. The wizard's eyes were half-lidded beneath the wide brim of his hat, which cast a shadow over his face, even as moonlight caught the lines of his withered robes. Tonight was calm. No cries of battle echoed in the dark, no shadow lingered on the borders of the elven refuge. The world beyond might still be uncertain, but here, in Rivendell, time moved slowly. Peace had settled over the valley like a quilt. And yet, even in peace, Gandalf remained watchful. His gaze moved across the treetops, toward the cliffs, then upward to the stars as though reading some secret in their patterns. For a long while, he simply stood there. The only sound was the rush of the waterfalls and the occasional call of a night bird drifting across the branches. But then, something stirred. It was faint, so faint that even the sharpest ears of the elves might have missed it. But Gandalf heard. Not with his ears, but with something deeper. A hum, deep within the staff. Not audible, not physical. It was a vibration, like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, old. He looked down at the staff in his hand. It had always been carved of ash wood, dark and smooth, with subtle etchings that even he rarely studied closely. At the top, a knot of wood twisted around a clear stone, set like a star caught in the gnarled roots of time. That stone now glowed, only a little, but enough. It pulsed with a quiet blue light, as though it were breathing. Gandalf frowned, gently brushing his fingers over it. "You are waking," he whispered to the staff, as if it were a creature rather than a thing. "Why now, old friend?" There was no answer, but the humming continued. Not louder, only deeper. He could feel it through his palm, in his bones. From within the halls behind him came the light tread of footsteps. Elrond appeared, robed in silver and white, a quiet smile on his face. He too looked up at the stars before turning his eyes on Gandalf. "You do not rest, Mithrandir," Elrond said softly, using the elvish name by which the elves called him. Gandalf returned a small smile. "The stars keep me company. They never sleep. And tonight they seem particularly thoughtful." Elrond stepped beside him, his gaze following Gandalf's into the quiet of the valley. "You sense it too, then?" For a moment, Gandalf was silent. Then he nodded. Yes. Not danger, not yet. But something is stirring. Old echoes. Old voices. Elrond's eyes fell to the staff. He tilted his head slightly, noting the faint shimmer in the stone. Your staff glows. Gandalf looked down again. The light was steady now. Not bright enough to cast shadows, but no longer fading. I have carried this staff for a long time, he said slowly, as though remembering aloud. Longer than many would guess. There are things in this world, things woven into the wood and stone. Some meant to help. Some meant to wait. Wait for what? Elrond asked, voice low. Gandalf's answer came after a long breath. A time of need. A moment when light must be born, not summoned. They stood there together, the wizard and the elf lord, old friends who had seen centuries pass like seasons. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with memory, with wisdom, with the weight of a world always on the brink of waking or dreaming. Gandalf turned away from the balcony and stepped into the chamber behind, his robes brushing softly against the stone floor. He sat in a high-backed chair carved with vines and leaves, and laid the staff across his lap. The fire in the hearth burned low but steady, casting flickers of gold across the chamber walls. Elrond followed, pausing at the threshold. Perhaps, he said, this is only a whisper. A memory passing through your staff like wind through leaves. Perhaps, Gandalf agreed. Or perhaps it is the beginning of something forgotten. Elrond gave a slow nod, then, with a quiet farewell, slipped back into the halls of Rivendell, leaving Gandalf alone once more. The wizard leaned back, letting his eyes fall closed. He did not sleep, not in the way men do. But he entered a place between thought and dream, where time flowed differently, and memory took shape. There, in that in-between place, he found himself walking through mists of silver and shadow. And from within that mist, he heard a voice. It was faint, ancient, female. Guardian, keeper of the flame, you carry more than light in your hand. He turned, but saw no one. Do not forget the old tongue, the voice continued. It will awaken the buried stars. Then silence. Gandalf opened his eyes. The fire still burned, the night still calm. But the staff in his lap glowed with a pulse now, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. He did not move. He only whispered, Where are you hiding, old friend? The staff gave no answer. But the stone at its tip shimmered with the soft promise of something long asleep and now stirring again. Outside, the first soft light of dawn began to touch the sky, brushing pink against the mountains. The stars faded one by one, giving way to day. Rivendell stirred slowly to life. But Gandalf remained still, cradling the staff, feeling its quiet song echo in his soul. Something was waking. Not in anger, not yet, but in readiness. And the world, though peaceful still, had begun to breathe differently. Just enough to be noticed. Just enough to whisper, soon. The morning light in Rivendell was a gentle thing, never harsh nor hurried. It filtered through the leaves like honey spilled from the sky, golden and thick, settling upon every surface with quiet patience. Birds trilled softly in the trees, and the waters of the Brunnen sang their endless song, unchanged by time. In this valley of peace, each day woke as if from a dream and stepped slowly into life. Gandalf stirred in his chair near the hearth, the ashes now cool and gray. His staff still rested across his lap, but the glow within the crystal had faded to the faintest shimmer, like the last ember hiding under a blanket of ash. His eyes opened slowly, not with urgency, but with the unhurried calm of one who listens before he acts. He sat there a while, allowing the warmth of morning to touch his face. Around him, the quiet of Rivendell held like a protective cloak, soft and unbroken. And yet, inside him, something stirred, an echo of that voice from the dream, those words carried on mist and memory. Do not forget the old tongue. It will awaken the buried stars. It was not the first time Gandalf had heard a voice in sleep, not even the first time it had felt real. But this was different. This was older than dreams, deeper than magic. This was memory. Not his, perhaps, but bound to him nonetheless. He stood at last, his robes falling in soft folds, and moved to the wide windows of the chamber. From here, he could see the farthest edge of the valley, where trees began to cluster thickly once more, and the cliffs rose like watchful giants. Elrond entered quietly, as if summoned not by voice but by the shift in the air. He carried a small tray with tea, steamy and fragrant, a mixture of calming herbs known only to elves, and a few slices of lembas, still warm from the kitchens. "You did not sleep," Elrond observed as he set the tray upon a nearby table. "I slept in my own way," Gandalf replied, his voice low and thoughtful. Elrond poured the tea into 2 delicate cups of silver-rimmed glass. "And what did your dreams show you?" Gandalf accepted the cup with a nod of thanks, cradling it in both hands. "Not dreams. Echoes. Whispers from long before this age. A voice I have not heard in many lifetimes." Elrond waited patiently, sipping his tea. "There is a name," Gandalf said at last. "Long buried. I had forgotten it until last night. Or perhaps it chose to return only now." He stepped away from the window, returning to his staff. He stood over it, staring at the crystal as if it might answer him with its silence. "Elianiel," he said softly, and the name drifted through the chamber like a feather on the wind. Elrond's brow furrowed faintly. "That is Quenya. Ancient. A name of the stars." "Daughter of the stars," Gandalf murmured. "Or more truly, child of the light that was before flame. She was not of flesh, nor the Vala. She was spirit, woven from starlight itself. She once danced across the skies before the world took form. A being of light and song." Elrond set his cup down gently, the sound barely a whisper. "Such names are nearly forgotten. Where did you hear it?" "In the crystal," Gandalf said. "Or rather, from within." The voice spoke her name. Not as a title, but a memory. He picked up the staff and held it before him. The wood felt warmer now, more alive than it should have in his hands. "I believe her spirit was bound to this staff long ago," he said. "Perhaps by the High Elves. Perhaps by something even older. And until last night, she slept. Or watched. Or waited." Elrond's eyes glimmered with quiet understanding. "You have wielded that staff for many years, Mithrandir. Why now does she speak?" "That is what I do not know," Gandalf answered, lowering the staff slowly. "But the hum I felt last night, it was not a warning. It was a stirring, as though she sensed something." He turned toward Elrond, his expression distant. Something coming. Elrond nodded slowly. The world trembles in small ways. Even in Rivendell, I feel it. Not yet a quake, but a ripple. Silence settled between them again. The kind of silence that allowed thought to grow like ivy, winding its way through ancient walls and older hearts. Would you speak with Galadriel? Elrond asked at last. If any living remember the truth of such spirits, it would be her. In time, Gandalf replied. But for now, I must listen. There is more to hear, I think. More to remember. The wizard walked slowly into the garden, past a blooming Eleanor and Nifrdil that opened like stars in daylight. He sat on a stone bench beneath a birch tree, the leaves fluttering like silver laughter in the breeze. He closed his eyes again, not to sleep, but to listen. And there, in the golden hush of Rivendell's garden, the voice came once more. Fainter than before, but clearer in tone. You must not wait too long, Mithrandir, it said, her voice a melody in wind. The flame is rising in places you do not yet see. I cannot awaken fully, not yet. Only in shadow, only when the light is nearly gone. Gandalf did not reply. He only breathed, slow and deep, as the wind brushed his beard and the trees whispered old songs overhead. The day passed quietly. Elves walked in soft procession through the gardens, some singing, others reading under trees or tending to blossoms that needed neither tending nor pruning. Rivendell was timeless in its peace, and yet Gandalf felt it differently now, as if the peace were holding its breath. When evening came again and stars once more peeked through the purple veil of twilight, Gandalf sat once more in the hall, his staff upright before him. And again, the crystal shimmered, no brighter than a dewdrop catching the moon. A reminder. A heartbeat. He touched it gently, and for a fleeting moment, the warmth of another presence brushed against his fingertips. Not magic, but something alive. A companion long silent. I remember you now, Gandalf whispered, voice barely a breath. Elianiel. May your light guide mine when the hour is darkest. Outside, night unfolded its quiet wings over Rivendell, and the stars, ancient and watchful, looked down with silent approval. And though the valley still slumbered in peace, something old and quiet and powerful had awakened. It was the third morning since the glow in Gandalf's staff first stirred, and Rivendell remained still beneath the soft hush of spring. Mist lingered in the folds of the valley like silken veils drawn by invisible hands. The scent of blooming Eleanor drifted on the cool air, sweet and light, while birds warbled their waking songs from the treetops, their voices gentle and content. Gandalf stood again on the eastern terrace, his grey cloak fluttering softly behind him, and in his hand, always, now, he carried the staff. It no longer pulsed as it had that first night, but the wizard had not forgotten the way it had felt alive beneath his fingers, or the way the voice of Elianiel had lingered in the corners of his thoughts like a distant harp string, vibrating just beyond hearing. He had not told many about it, not even the council. Only Elrond knew, and Elrond had not spoken of it since. It was a quiet understanding, shared between two who had seen the passage of ages and knew that some truths were best left undisturbed until their hour came. But that peaceful hour was not to last. For that very morning, as Gandalf watched the mists lift and the first rays of sun paint the valley in gold, the rhythm of footsteps reached his ears, quick, light, and familiar. He turned, brows lifting beneath his wide-brimmed hat. There, coming along the garden path, were two small figures, one in a brown cloak, the other in one of faded green. Hobbits. Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee, their faces travel-worn but bright with determination. Gandalf. Frodo called, waving as he hurried forward. The wizard smiled, genuinely pleased. "Well now," he said, "you two are a sight for sore eyes. I wasn't expecting any travelers from the Shire." Frodo reached him first and gave a slight bow, still breathing heavily. Sam came behind, brushing dust from his cloak. "We didn't come from the Shire," Frodo said, voice quiet but steady. "We came from Lorien. But on the way, we passed near the edge of Fangorn. And something strange is happening there." Gandalf's face grew serious. "Strange?" Frodo nodded. "We stayed with some woodmen for a night, simple folk who live on the edge of the forest. They spoke of a darkness spreading from within the trees. Not orcs, they said. Not anything they've seen before." Sam, looking pale, added, "They said the forest doesn't sound the same. No birds. No rustling leaves. Like something swallowed the wind." Gandalf's hand tightened around his staff. "I felt something too," Frodo continued. "Just once. In the middle of the night. A pressure in the air. Like something watching from the woods." Gandalf said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned his gaze eastward, toward the far hills. "Fangorn is an old place. Older than men. Even older than elves, in some ways. And it remembers everything." Sam swallowed nervously. "Do you think it's something to worry about?" Gandalf looked down at the hobbits, his expression softened with a kind of warmth only he could show. "If it were nothing, it wouldn't have reached you. Or stirred my staff. I think this is exactly what we were meant to find." Frodo looked uneasy, but nodded. "Then, what do we do?" "We go and see," Gandalf replied simply, as though they were about to visit an old friend. And so, by midday, the three of them were on the road, their feet light upon the winding stone paths of Rivendell. The elves watched them go with gentle eyes, some with sadness, others with a quiet kind of hope. Elrond met them at the edge of the bridge, placing a hand upon Frodo's shoulder and giving Gandalf a long, knowing look. "Be careful," he said. "Old trees guard older secrets." "I intend only to listen," Gandalf replied. "If the forest allows it." The journey was unhurried, for Gandalf had no taste for haste unless it was needed. They traveled by foot along the old East Road, the hills rolling wide and green around them. Sam often sang to himself, soft songs of home and garden, while Frodo remained mostly quiet, lost in thought. At night, they made small camps beneath the stars. Gandalf would smoke his pipe and watch the flames with far-off eyes, the staff resting beside him like a faithful companion. The crystal within no longer glowed, but every now and then he would feel the faintest warmth stir within it, like a sleeping breath. On the third evening of their travel, the forest of Fangorn came into view. From a distance, it looked like a sea of black-green shadows, its canopy thick and unmoving, even in the gentle wind. Unlike the woods of the Shire or the golden boughs of Lothlorien, Fangorn felt heavy. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that suggested age beyond reckoning. A forest that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. As they approached, the songs of the birds faded. Even the crickets fell silent. The hush deepened into something that wasn't quite silence, it was listening. Frodo stopped just before the tree line. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. Gandalf nodded. "Yes. The forest knows we're here." They made camp that night on the very edge of the woods, just beyond the reach of the trees. Frodo and Sam took turns resting while Gandalf kept watch. He did not sleep. Instead, he sat with the staff laid across his knees, staring into the fire. And in the heart of the flame, he saw again the shimmer of starlight. A voice came, softer now, barely there. Close, so close, beneath the roots of silence. Gandalf closed his eyes. "Soon," he whispered to the staff. "Not yet, but soon." And the staff pulsed once, faint and warm, as if in reply. He looked toward the trees. There was something within Fangorn. Something old, perhaps older even than the Ents. And whatever it was, it had begun to stir. As his dream had warned, the world's breath was changing. But for now, the fire crackled, and the stars kept their quiet watch. The forest loomed, patient and listening. And beneath the hush of the trees, something waited to be found. Morning came softly to the edge of Fangorn Forest, though it did not feel the same as the morning in Rivendell or even the open road behind them. The light was filtered and hesitant, as if unsure whether it was welcome here. Dew clung thickly to every blade of grass, and the air was still with the sort of stillness that wrapped around the world like a hush in a grand hall. Even the birds that had followed them from the hills kept their distance now. Gandalf rose first, as always. He did not need to stretch or shake sleep from his limbs. Instead, he sat quietly for a time, listening. The crackling fire had long since died to embers, but he could hear something else, something deeper. It wasn't a sound, not exactly. It was more like the sense that something ancient was breathing beneath the forest floor, too slow and too vast to be measured in heartbeats. A presence. Not malevolent, not welcoming, simply aware. Frodo stirred, rubbing his eyes as he emerged from his bedroll. Sam, already awake, was busying himself with preparing a modest breakfast, some remaining lembas and a bit of dried fruit. He didn't sing this morning. "Are we going in today?" Frodo asked quietly. Gandalf nodded. "Just a little way. We listened before we stepped too deep." They ate in calm silence, and when all was packed, Gandalf led them toward the forest's edge. The trees of Fangorn were not like other woods. They stood like guardians, tall and close, their trunks wide and gnarled, bark rough as stone, and their branches thick with leaves that whispered to one another without wind. There was no path, but Gandalf seemed to know the way, or perhaps he allowed the forest to decide. As they crossed beneath the first shadow of the canopy, the world changed. The air grew cool and heavy. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in long, slow shafts that felt almost solid, like light underwater. Moss blanketed the ground in soft carpets, and every root and stone was wrapped in green. It smelled of earth and rain and time. Frodo looked around with wide eyes. "It's like stepping into an old story." Gandalf smiled faintly. "That's exactly what it is." For a time, they walked in silence. The forest did not impede them, nor did it open easily. It was as though it observed their every step and judged whether they should be allowed to continue. Gandalf paused often, placing a hand on the bark of a great tree or closing his eyes as though listening to voices carried in the rustling leaves. The staff in his hand remained still. No glow, no warmth. But he felt it again, that subtle pull, like a current guiding him just beneath the surface of his thoughts. And beneath it all, the memory of Elianiel's voice. At midday, they reached a small glade where a fallen tree had created a clearing. The ground was soft and dry, the light golden and calm. Gandalf motioned for them to rest. As they sat, Sam broke the silence. "Do you think the forest is watching us, Mr. Gandalf?" "Yes," the wizard said without hesitation. "But not as we watch one another. It listens and remembers." Frodo touched a moss-covered root beside him. "It feels sad, like an old friend who's lost something long ago." Gandalf turned his eyes to the trees. Fangorn has seen much. Long before elves walked under starlight, these woods were here. And long before men built towers or dwarves carved halls, something walked among these trees. The staff in his hand shifted slightly. Just a twitch, as if responding to his words. He looked down at it. The crystal at its crown flickered, only for a heartbeat, and then dimmed again. "Elianiel," he whispered under his breath. Frodo tilted his head. "What was that?" Gandalf didn't answer at once. He stared into the forest. Then, gently, he said, "There was a time when spirits of light wandered freely. Not in form as we know, but as threads of being. Songs that wove the world together. Elianiel was one such spirit. I believe she was bound to this staff by those who sought to preserve her light when the world began to darken." Sam shivered. "Sounds like something out of a fairy tale." "Many fairy tales are fragments of truth, worn smooth by time," Gandalf said. "And some truths are too large to hold without turning them into story." The forest grew quieter, if such a thing were possible. Gandalf stood. "I need to go further in," he said, voice low. "You two should stay here. I will not be far." Frodo started to object, but Gandalf's gaze was gentle but firm. "Only for a little while." The hobbits nodded reluctantly, settling beside the fallen tree. Gandalf stepped alone into the deeper shade, his staff now humming with a soft, almost inaudible rhythm, like the slow beat of an ancient drum. The forest no longer felt neutral. It felt expectant. He walked until the trees thickened, their roots tangling like knotted stories beneath his feet. Then he found a stone, flat and worn with time, and placed his hand upon it. "Elianiel," he said aloud, voice soft as wind. "If you hear me, show me." The crystal glowed. Bright. Warm. For the first time since Rivendell, it shone with the light of a star caught in a raindrop. The forest sighed. Branches above swayed without breeze. Leaves rustled a single word. Below. Gandalf closed his eyes. The image came at once, clear and sharp. A cavern. Roots hanging from the ceiling like tendrils of memory. Water still as glass. And something waiting at the center, cradled in earth and time. A memory sealed beneath the forest. He opened his eyes. The glow faded, but not completely. The staff now carried a faint light, pulsing like a heartbeat. He returned to Frodo and Sam, who looked up anxiously. "We have a direction," he said. "There is something beneath Fangorn. A place hidden even from the trees above." Sam looked up at the towering canopy. How do you hide something in a place like this? Gandalf smiled faintly. With magic older than sorrow. They made camp again that evening not far from the glade. The hobbits took turns on watch, though they slept lightly, ears attuned to every shift in the wind. Gandalf did not sleep. He sat cross-legged, the staff resting beside him. The glow had steadied now, and with it, the voice had returned, clearer than before, yet still clothed in the gentleness of starlight. You are close, Mithrandir. But the earth remembers pain. The way is guarded not by malice, but by mourning. Gandalf bowed his head. Then I will walk gently. The forest rustled its slow, solemn song, and the night folded gently around them as if Fangorn itself were drawing a blanket of dreams across the camp, whispering lullabies in a language older than sleep. The morning broke over Fangorn like a whispered secret, its light filtering through the thick boughs in long, gentle streams. The air still held that heavy, expectant stillness, as though the forest were listening, waiting for something only it could hear. Gandalf stood at the edge of the small camp, gazing into the depths of the trees with the same quiet intensity he had carried since they first entered the forest's shadow. Frodo and Sam were still wrapped in their bedrolls, sleeping soundly despite the eerie quiet of their surroundings. Gandalf's gaze lingered on them for a moment before he turned back to the woods, his hand resting lightly on his staff. The crystal at its top glimmered faintly in the morning light, as though it knew what was coming, knew that the path would soon reveal itself in ways he could not yet understand. He had heard Elioniniel's voice again that night, fainter than before, but unmistakably present. The words were always the same, beneath. And with those words, the image of the cavern had returned in his mind's eye, its darkness deep and vast, yet there was something familiar about it. Something ancient and yet strangely comforting. It was as if the place was not simply hidden within the earth, but rather it had been forgotten, sealed away, like a memory too old for the world to remember. Now, as Gandalf stood on the edge of the camp, he knew that whatever lay beneath Fangorn was not merely a physical place, it was a memory. A thing bound to the very soul of the forest. He glanced once more at the hobbits. They were still asleep, and the morning's quiet offered them a rare peace. He smiled faintly and decided to wait, letting the forest's secrets unfold in their own time. It would be no use rushing, after all. The wind shifted, and the trees whispered, a sound like the soft murmur of an old language. Gandalf's staff vibrated gently in his hand. You must follow the path, the voice murmured again, and this time it seemed to come not from the staff, but from the earth itself. The path beneath the roots. Gandalf's heart quickened, though his face remained serene. He knelt down, placing a hand against the cold earth beneath the moss and fallen leaves. The soil was thick and rich, but there was something unusual about it, a sense of energy beneath the surface, pulsing slowly, like the beat of a heart. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening. The forest was alive with a deeper hum now, one he could feel through his fingertips, through his very bones. When he opened his eyes again, the decision had been made. He would go deeper into the forest alone. The hobbits would not be ready for what lay ahead, though they had proved themselves brave beyond measure. This was something they could not yet bear. This was a journey into the heart of ancient power, a place where light and shadow intertwined in ways that even Gandalf had yet to fully understand. He took a deep breath and rose. The staff in his hand seemed heavier now, as though the crystal was drawing on the energy of the earth itself. He did not hesitate. He he walked forward, moving deeper into the shadow of the trees. Frodo stirred as Gandalf passed, his eyes fluttering open. He saw the wizard's retreating figure and stood, calling out softly, "Gandalf?" The wizard turned back just long enough to meet Frodo's gaze. There was a deep understanding between them, an unspoken communication that only the two of them shared. Gandalf gave him a faint smile, one full of knowing. "Stay here, Frodo. I will not be long." The hobbit nodded, though his face was full of quiet concern. Gandalf had not told him everything, he never did. There were some things that could only be understood by walking the path alone. With that, Gandalf stepped forward once more, disappearing into the dense thicket of the forest. The trees closed around him like a wall, and the air grew colder, denser. The quiet of the forest was no longer a soothing presence but a weight pressing against his chest, as if the forest were inhaling with him and exhaling with the rhythm of his steps. The path grew narrow, the trees closer together, and soon the forest floor was covered with thick layers of roots that twisted and turned, making every step uncertain. Gandalf's staff glowed faintly now, casting long shadows on the ground, lighting his way in the gloom. His senses were sharpened. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the branches above, every subtle shift in the air seemed to resonate with him. He continued forward, guided by an unseen hand, the path twisting beneath him as though the earth itself was beckoning him onward. His thoughts turned again to the voice, Eleniel's voice, and the image of the cavern beneath Fangorn. The words "beneath" and "remember" echoed in his mind like a chant. Then, as he moved deeper, the forest opened up before him. It was as though the trees themselves had parted, leaving him in a small, secluded clearing where the ground was unusually level, and the air seemed charged with an invisible energy. At the center of the clearing, a stone archway rose from the earth, covered in vines and moss, its edges worn by centuries of time. Gandalf stopped before it, staring at the arch. It was a simple thing, yet its presence was undeniable. The stone felt ancient, older than the trees surrounding him, and yet it radiated a sense of profound quiet, as though it had been waiting for this moment. For him. His staff hummed faintly in his hand, and he felt an irresistible pull toward the arch. He could not explain it, but he knew that this was where the answer lay. He stepped forward, feeling the coolness of the stone as he touched the arch with his free hand. The moment his fingers made contact, a ripple of energy passed through him, like a thread of light that connected him to something far deeper, far older than anything he had ever known. The earth beneath his feet seemed to tremble, and for a brief moment, the ground before him shifted, revealing a dark passage leading downward. It was narrow at first, winding deeper into the earth, but the air felt alive with ancient magic, and Gandalf knew that there was no turning back. He stepped into the passage. The walls were smooth, made of the same stone as the archway, and they hummed softly with the same energy he had felt earlier. The further he went, the more the air seemed to shimmer with power. It was as though the very fabric of the world itself was holding its breath. At the end of the passage, the stone floor gave way to a cavernous chamber. The space was vast, so vast that Gandalf could not see its farthest edge. Yet the air here was different. Lighter. As if the weight of the earth had been lifted just enough for him to breathe deeply. And at the center of the cavern, in the middle of an ancient, circular pool, lay an object of pure light. It was difficult to see clearly, but it radiated warmth and beauty beyond description. A ball of starlight, glimmering and alive, floating just above the surface of the pool. Gandalf felt its pull in the deepest parts of his being, and his heart quickened. He moved toward it, stepping into the water without hesitation. The moment his feet touched the cool surface, a voice echoed around him, a soft, melodious voice, not unlike Elianael's. "Welcome, Mithrandir. You have found it." Gandalf's voice caught in his throat as he gazed at the ball of light. His mind seemed to fill with memories not his own, of starlight, of ancient songs, and of a time before the world was shaped by mortal hands. He knelt before the pool, his staff held steady, as the light slowly, almost reverently, began to glow brighter. "Is this your gift?" Gandalf whispered. "Yes," the voice replied. "A gift for you, and for the world." The staff in his hand pulsed in time with the light. And in that moment, Gandalf understood. This was not just a place of power. This was a place of balance, of light and shadow intertwined, of memory and future interwoven. And now, as he knelt before it, he was part of that balance. Gandalf's eyes did not leave the sphere of light that hovered just above the water. He could feel the warmth of it in his chest, a soft, pulsing rhythm that matched the quiet beating of his heart. It was as though the light was alive, and he could almost hear it, whispers too faint to understand, like the soft rustling of leaves or the murmuring of distant voices. For a long while, he did not move. He simply knelt at the edge of the pool, feeling the stillness of the cavern around him. The walls were smooth and ancient, as if they had been carved by hands that were long gone. Yet the air was filled with power, a power that seemed to wrap around him, tightening and loosening in gentle waves. It was an energy both ancient and new, a force that was part of the earth itself, as if the very roots of the world had come alive to speak to him. He reached out slowly, his fingers trembling as they hovered just above the glowing sphere. The light responded immediately, as if it had been waiting for him to touch it. The moment his fingertips brushed against the sphere, a pulse of energy shot through him, a shock of warmth and light that filled him from the inside out. His vision blurred for a moment, and his breath caught in his throat. For a moment, everything was still. And then, the voice came again, this time, clearer, more insistent. "Gandalf." He pulled his hand back, blinking as his vision cleared. The voice was not loud, but it carried a weight, an authority that he could not deny. "Gandalf, bearer of the Staff of Light. You have found the heart of the forest. The power of the world sleeps beneath the roots, but it is waking. It has been waiting for you." Gandalf's heart raced. His grip tightened on his staff, and he looked around the cavern. The light in the pool had dimmed slightly, but its presence was no less powerful. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the words he had just heard. The heart of the forest? The power of the world? These were not simple phrases. They were profound, speaking to a deeper truth that even he could not fully grasp. The voice spoke again, this time with a gentler tone. "The staff you carry is not merely a tool, Mithrandir. It is a bridge, a link between worlds, between light and shadow, memory and time. It is a relic of the old ones, those who walked the earth before the first age. They saw the world not as men or else see it, but as it truly is, an endless dance of creation and destruction, of light and dark, of birth and death." Gandalf felt a tremor pass through him. The staff in his hand thrummed with a familiar energy. He could feel its power, deep and ancient, flowing through him. It was as though the staff had become part of him, an extension of his very being. He had known for some time that it was more than just a tool of magic. But now, in the depths of this hidden place, he understood that it was something far greater. "You are not the first to seek the power beneath the roots," the voice continued. "Many have come before you, those who sought to control it, to bend it to their will. But they did not understand. They did not know that the true power of the forest lies not in domination, but in balance. The old ones knew this, but they are gone. Their knowledge is lost, scattered across the winds of time. It is you, Mithrandir, who must restore it." Gandalf's mind whirled. He had never been one to seek power for its own sake, and yet the weight of the words hung heavy on him. He had come to this place seeking answers, seeking to understand the strange pull of the staff, to uncover the mysteries of Eleniel's voice. But now, it seemed, the answers were leading him down a path he had not expected. "The balance of the world is fragile," the voice whispered. "The power beneath the roots is ancient, but it is not infinite. It is tied to the earth itself, to the trees, to the waters, and to the very breath of the world. If the balance is disrupted, if the power is abused, then the world itself will fall into shadow. And all that you hold dear will be lost." Gandalf closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the forest pressing in around him. He could hear the faint rustling of the leaves above, the distant call of birds, the quiet murmur of the earth beneath his feet. The forest was alive, and it was waiting for something. He could feel it in his bones, in the very air around him. It was a presence, subtle but undeniable. "Your staff," the voice continued, "has been passed down through generations of wizards. It carries the wisdom of the old ones, the knowledge of those who knew the earth and the stars. But it is not a weapon. It is a key to unlocking the true power of the forest." Gandalf's thoughts returned to the moments before he had entered this cavern, to the pull of the staff, to the faint glow that had drawn him deeper into the heart of the forest. He understood now. The staff was not just a symbol of power, it was a conduit, a link between the physical world and something far greater. It was the key to understanding the ancient forces that had shaped the world before the coming of men, before the shaping of Middle-earth as it was known today. And it was clear now that the forest, Fangorn itself, was connected to that ancient force. The trees, the roots, the very soil beneath his feet, they were all part of a greater whole, a living organism that spanned the ages. The forest was not merely a collection of trees. It was a living memory, an archive of the earth itself. "The power beneath the roots is not a gift," the voice said softly. "It is a responsibility. The earth remembers. It remembers all that has been, all that will be. It is a keeper of time, of life, and of death. But it is fragile, Mithrandir, and you must protect it." Gandalf opened his eyes, his thoughts focused. The light in the pool shimmered again, casting reflections on the stone walls of the cavern. He could feel the weight of the staff in his hand, its power thrumming through him, but he did not feel fear. Instead, he felt a deep sense of purpose, a purpose that was greater than himself. The voice, now quiet, spoke once more. "You must go to the place where the roots meet. The place where light and shadow dance. There, you will find the answer." Gandalf stood, his staff in hand, and looked around the cavern one last time. The light in the pool began to dim, but its glow was still warm and steady. He felt the pull of the forest once more, and he knew that the time had come to leave this place, to continue his journey deeper into the heart of Fangorn. With a final glance at the pool, he turned and walked toward the passage that had led him here. The air seemed lighter now, as though the very earth itself was breathing in unison with him. The power beneath the roots was still there, but it was no longer an overwhelming force. Instead, it felt like a quiet hum in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of the responsibility he carried. As he moved through the dark passage, the whispers of the forest faded behind him. The light of the cavern was left behind, but it had imprinted itself on his heart. He understood now. The balance of the world was delicate, and it was his task, his burden, to protect it. Outside the cavern, the trees of Fangorn stood still, their ancient boughs reaching up toward the sky. The forest, it seemed, had always been waiting for this moment. And now, with Gandalf's understanding of its power, the path ahead seemed clearer. He stepped back into the forest, and for the first time since his arrival, the forest did not feel like an unknown place. It felt like home. Gandalf emerged from the dark tunnel into the open air of Fangorn once more, the forest stretching out before him like an ancient, unbroken tapestry. The trees stood tall and unmoving, their gnarled roots weaving into the earth with a silent, timeless strength. The wind, faint and whispering, swept through the branches, carrying with it the scent of the forest, deep, rich, and full of life. He stood still for a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of the woods, feeling the weight of the journey ahead settle on his shoulders. The task before him was one of great consequence, far greater than he had anticipated. What had once seemed like an exploration of ancient power had become something far more profound, a responsibility that stretched across the very fabric of time and life. The power of the forest, the memory of the earth itself, was fragile. It had been entrusted to him to protect it from those who would seek to disturb the balance. He glanced back at the narrow passageway from which he had just emerged, the stone tunnel that led into the heart of the forest. The place was silent now, as though the very cavern had exhaled its breath and was waiting for him to leave. The energy within the cavern had shifted, receding into the earth, leaving him with a newfound clarity. His staff hummed gently in his hand, a soft vibration that seemed to echo the pulse of the earth itself. He could still feel the presence of the pool, the quiet hum of the light, the ancient knowledge that had flowed through him. It was not a memory, not something he could forget. The voice in the cavern had been clear. He was the keeper of something far older than himself, a protector of the balance between light and shadow. The ancient power beneath Fangorn was not meant to be controlled, not meant to be wielded as a weapon. It was part of the world, as much a part of the earth as the trees and the rivers. Yet there were forces in the world, forces of darkness, that would not understand this. They would seek to exploit it, to twist it into something it was not. Gandalf's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the trees began to thin and the first rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows on the ground. There was something on the wind now, something he could not quite place. A sense of urgency. It was faint but unmistakable, like a warning carried by the breeze. He took a step forward, his staff guiding his path, and the forest seemed to open up before him. The deeper he walked into the woods, the more the air itself seemed to change, thickening with the energy of the forest. The trees whispered to one another, their voices a soft murmur that Gandalf could not fully understand. The forest had always been full of secrets, and now it seemed to be revealing its oldest one to him. As he walked, his thoughts returned to the light he had seen in the cavern, the light beneath the roots. That light was a symbol, he now realized, of the balance between all things. It had been hidden for ages, but it was not just a relic to be discovered. It was a living force, and its pulse was tied to the pulse of the earth itself. There was a quiet beauty in this realization, but also a great weight. For Gandalf, the power was never the most important thing, it was the responsibility that came with it. He had never sought power for its own sake, but now he understood that the task ahead would not be easy. He was not just a wanderer or a guide. He was a protector. And his role in the world, his purpose, had just become far clearer. As he journeyed deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow older, their bark weathered and rough, their branches reaching up as though seeking something higher. The light began to shift, growing softer and more diffused as the day wore on, casting long shadows that danced beneath the canopy. The forest was alive, and it was watching him, guiding him towards something he had not yet fully understood. After a time, Gandalf reached a small clearing, a place where the trees parted to reveal a circle of stone. The stones were large and ancient, worn smooth by time and the elements, and they formed a perfect ring around a small, serene pool. The water was still, its surface reflecting the branches above in perfect symmetry. It was a quiet, peaceful place, one that seemed untouched by time. He knelt by the pool, his staff resting against his side. The calm water mirrored the sky above, and for a moment, Gandalf found himself lost in its stillness. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the journey pressing against him, but also the weight of something far greater, the weight of the world itself. The voice spoke again, soft but clear, echoing in his mind as though it had never truly left. Gandalf, you have come far, but there is more to be done. His brow furrowed as he stood and looked into the water. The pool seemed to shimmer slightly, the image of the sky above blurring, and in its place, he saw something else. He saw the earth itself, its roots stretching deep beneath the surface. He saw the trees, the rivers, and the mountains, each connected by a thread of light, a thread that wove the world together. He could feel it now, the deep, ancient connection that tied all things together. And he understood, with startling clarity, that this was the heart of his task. It was not enough to simply guard the power of Fangorn. He had to guard the balance of all things. He had to be the keeper of the flame that connected the world, light and dark, life and death, creation and destruction. The voice continued, softer now, as though it were fading into the air itself. You are the bridge, Mithrandir, the keeper of the flame that burns beneath the roots. You must protect the balance, for the darkness is stirring. Forces that would undo this balance are rising. Gandalf's heart quickened at the mention of darkness. He had known for some time that there were forces, dark powers, that would seek to control the power he had uncovered. But hearing it so clearly, in the voice of the forest itself, was a sobering realization. He stood slowly, looking around the clearing, his eyes scanning the trees as if searching for something he could not yet see. The weight of his task pressed heavily on him. He had been a guide, a teacher, a friend, but now he was more than that. He was a protector, not just of the forest, but of the entire world. The voice faded, leaving only the soft murmur of the wind through the trees. Gandalf felt the pull of the staff in his hand once more, and with it, a quiet resolve settled in his heart. The forest was no longer simply a place of mystery, it was his responsibility. And with that responsibility came an ancient truth: to protect the balance, he would have to confront the darkness that threatened to unravel it. But even as the realization settled in his heart, a part of him could not ignore the deep, quiet sense of peace that surrounded him. The balance, though fragile, was not something to fear, it was something to protect. And in protecting it, he would protect all things. He took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the forest settle into his bones. The wind shifted, and for a moment, it seemed to carry with it the faintest whispers of the past. The earth itself seemed to be speaking to him, urging him forward. With one last glance at the pool, Gandalf turned and stepped back into the forest, his path now clearer than ever. The journey was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead, and the darkness would not wait. But Gandalf knew, with certainty, that he was not alone. The power of the forest, the light beneath the roots, was with him. And as long as he carried the staff, he would stand as a keeper of that flame. Gandalf's journey through the heart of Fangorn had led him to this moment, a quiet stillness beneath the towering trees, where the weight of the world seemed to pause, if only for a brief moment. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The path before him was clear now, illuminated by the pale, silver light of the rising moon, but the shadows were deepening. The time had come. He stood at the edge of the great clearing once again, where the trees spread wide in a perfect circle, the stones lying in their ancient ring like forgotten guardians. The small pool at the center of the circle shimmered beneath the moonlight, its surface undisturbed. It felt like the calm before a storm, the quiet that came just before a great change. The whispers of the forest had been with him every step of the way, guiding him, urging him forward. But now, there was a new presence, a shift in the air, an undercurrent of unease that tugged at his soul. The balance was fragile, and the darkness was close. The forces that threatened the world were no longer distant or abstract. They had found their way into the heart of Fangorn, and they would not rest until the ancient power beneath the roots was theirs. The staff in his hand hummed with quiet energy, its pulse steady, its light dimming and brightening with his every breath. Gandalf could feel its weight, not just as a physical object, but as a symbol of all that he had come to protect. The staff was not merely a tool, it was a conduit to something much deeper, something far older than he had ever realized. It was a part of the earth itself, and it carried within it the legacy of the old ones, the ancient beings who had once walked the world before men and elves had even dreamed of Middle-earth. Gandalf had learned much during his time in Fangorn, but the most important lesson was this: the power that lay beneath the forest was not a force that could be wielded, it was a living thing, a part of the world's natural rhythm, tied to the cycles of light and dark, life and death. To disturb this balance was to risk all life itself. But even now, with this knowledge, Gandalf could feel the darkness closing in. It was a shadow that had been growing in the hearts of men, elves, and orcs alike, a shadow of greed, of ambition, of a desire to control that which was not theirs to control. It was the darkness that had always threatened to overwhelm the world, and it was now here, in the very heart of the ancient forest. He had heard the voice of the forest, the voice that had spoken to him from the depths of the hidden cavern. It had warned him of this moment, the moment when the darkness would come, when the ancient power beneath the roots would be tested. And now, that moment had arrived. Gandalf raised his staff, feeling its energy surge through him. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly, as if the earth itself was preparing for what was to come. The forest stood still, holding its breath, waiting for the darkness to make its move. And then, he saw it. The shadow emerged from the trees, creeping silently, like a stain spreading across the land. It was not a physical shape, but a presence, an oppressive weight that seemed to suck the air from the very atmosphere. It moved with purpose, coiling around the edges of the clearing, stretching out like a dark hand reaching for the heart of the forest. Gandalf's grip on his staff tightened. He could feel the power of the forest gathering around him, the ancient energy of Fangorn responding to the presence of the shadow. But the darkness was not afraid. It had come to claim what it believed was rightfully its own. The ground beneath his feet shook again, this time more violently, and the air grew heavy with a terrible pressure. Gandalf's heart raced as he felt the pull of the darkness. It was calling to him, tempting him to join its cause. The shadow spoke, its voice a low, hissing whisper that seemed to echo in his mind. "You are too late, Mithrandir. The balance is mine to control. The forest is mine. The power beneath the roots is mine to command." Gandalf's mind raced. The shadow was not some single being, it was a force, a manifestation of all the fear and darkness that had ever existed in the hearts of those who sought to dominate the world. It was the very essence of what the forest had warned him about, the ambition to control that which could not be controlled, to bend the forces of nature to one's will. The voice of the forest spoke again, this time more urgently, as if it too could sense the danger. "Do not succumb, Mithrandir. The darkness seeks to destroy, to unravel the threads of life. You must protect the flame. You are the keeper." Gandalf's grip on his staff tightened further. He could feel the weight of his responsibility settling more heavily on his shoulders. He was the keeper of the balance, not just of Fangorn, but of all life. And this darkness would not be allowed to consume the world. The shadow writhed and twisted in the air, its presence growing stronger, more oppressive. But Gandalf did not flinch. He stood firm, his staff glowing brighter, its light pushing back against the darkness. The forest, too, responded, the trees creaking and groaning as if they were awakening from a long slumber. The shadow hissed again, its voice growing louder, more insistent. "You cannot stop me. The power beneath the roots is mine. I will bend it to my will, and all that you hold dear will be mine." But Gandalf's voice, calm and steady, rang out above the darkness. "You do not understand, Shadow. The power you seek is not yours to control. It is not a weapon to be wielded. It is the flame that burns in all things. It is the heart of the world, and it cannot be taken by force." With that, he raised his staff high, the light from its tip bursting outward in a wave of energy that washed over the clearing. The shadow recoiled, its form twisting and writhing as the light touched it. Gandalf's staff glowed brighter, its energy surging as if it were connected to something far greater than just the forest itself. The trees groaned in protest, their branches shaking as if in defiance of the darkness. The roots beneath the earth stirred, reaching upward as though to pull the shadow back into the depths from which it had come. Gandalf stood at the center of it all, his heart steady as he channeled the ancient power of the forest through his staff. The darkness roared, its voice a cacophony of whispers and growls, but Gandalf did not waver. He could feel the forest pulse beneath his feet, its life force intertwining with his own. "You are not its master," Gandalf said softly, but with great conviction. "The power of the roots belongs to no one. It belongs to the earth. It belongs to all who live and breathe, not to those who seek to dominate." With one final cry, the shadows seemed to explode, dissipating into the air like mist before the dawn. The trees swayed, their branches reaching toward the sky, and the ground beneath Gandalf's feet settled into calm once more. The darkness was gone, vanquished by the light of the forest and the unwavering resolve of its guardian. The clearing was still again. The air was lighter, as though the weight that had pressed upon it had been lifted. The forest seemed to sigh in relief, its ancient energy settling back into its natural rhythm. Gandalf lowered his staff, feeling its energy slowly fade into the earth, its light dimming but still present, a steady pulse beneath his skin. He stood alone in the clearing, his heart full but steady. The balance had been protected. The flame had been kept. And in that moment, Gandalf understood more than ever that his journey was not over. He was not just a guide or a wizard. He was the keeper of the flame, the protector of the balance that held the world together. The forest had shown him the truth, and he would carry that truth with him, always. As the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, Gandalf turned and walked out of the clearing, the staff now resting lightly in his hand. The world was waiting for him, but he knew that whatever came next, the flame of balance would always burn within him. And now, as this story comes to a close, take a moment to feel the peace that surrounds you. Let the calm of the tale settle into your mind, and know that you can return to this place of quiet whenever you need. The world can wait for tomorrow. For now, you are wrapped in the warmth of this moment, held by the gentle rhythm of the story. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let the stillness wash over you. Sleep is waiting, and with it, new dreams and new adventures. May you rest deeply and peacefully, knowing that the journey never truly ends, it simply continues in your heart, in your dreams. Good night, dear listener. Sweet dreams.